Lovely to see you, Premier.
Good afternoon to
Good
you.
afternoon.
Good afternoon to the audience.
You're bringing the energy this afternoon.
I'm trying, they have
Trying.
me running around the UAE. So,
what are you doing here, by the way?
What am I doing here? Well, this conversation is about partnerships.
Yes.
And so we are out here continuing to forge partnerships in the GCC region, but mainly the
Pen and paper partnerships?
pen and paper partnerships.
Have you
absolutely.
signed? What have you
Yes,
signed?
we have. Well, there were agreements with Bahrain. There's also agreements that we signed here yesterday, an MOU on public finance management.
Yeah.
And we're looking to continue to progress our agreements. We have agreements now in place with the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, and looking to do Saudi Arabia as well, and then on to Oman and Kuwait.
That's very exciting. I mean, and it's incredible to see these partner. And we were talking about it doesn't matter what size your country is. You're starting to see even the smaller nations having a voice, having a seat at the table across various geographies. And it feels like this region is very open to those relationships. Are you feeling that here, comparatively speaking?
Well, absolutely. I think that, of course, Bermuda being a non-sovereign territory, being the oldest colony of the United Kingdom or overseas territory, we have a special place. But the ties that bind this region are great. And so we've certainly seen them welcoming. We've certainly seen, and the fact is that no relationship is a one-way street. We have many things that we can offer. Bermuda is an expert in financial services regulation, known throughout the world for our expertise in risk management, while there is a region here that is continuing to grow, and they need some of the solutions that our companies in Bermuda can offer. So from that particular perspective, we are bringing something to the table, and I think that's what's always important. Recognition that companies do have specialties. They are able to do something, and in any relationship, whether big or small, there is always something that you can bring to the table.
So let me ask you this, with the clear global confrontation that's on the go, you just have to open your phone now. I could read you 20 headlines of things that are being said and done that is threatening the world as we know it and the system as we know it. Has that touched you, and in which way has it affected Bermuda?
I wouldn't say that it has affected us directly. I think the biggest challenge which we have is, in some cases, the unpredictable policy making, which is a challenge, especially when you may be over-dependent on one area or another. So, of course, the Secretary General of the Commonwealth was just here speaking about common issues. From a Bermuda perspective, I see the Premier of the British Virgin Islands is here as well, but from a common perspective, we are members of CARICOM. And in CARICOM, we were all faced with a massive shipping fee tax that was proposed by the United States that required all of us to come together collectively to speak with one voice, and we ended up being excluded from that, which would have been detrimental to all of our economies. So I think the change in relationships, but it is a wake-up call, and I think what you see now, whether it's in our basin or others, is persons who are rapidly looking to diversify their particular trading relationships, of which they had built up and established for, decades.
So you're diversifying for protection, right? You have to.
Mm-hmm.
And where is that diversion occurring? I mean, if you look at the latest trade numbers, China has, record surplus. That's a reality. And on the face of it, people are saying, well, China's kind of winning this confrontation because people are de-risking from the United States. So how have you diversified?
Well, for us, it's a little bit more challenging. Certainly, we are very tied to the United States economy. So it is the exploration of trade links in other places. I see His Royal Highness, Prince Edward is here. But the reality is the United Kingdom government has continued to work with us insofar as expanding our relationships. UK Export Finance is working on additional shipping routes to go from the United Kingdom and others. We are engaging with Canada on particular shipping routes just to make sure that we have those particular options. And as the build out and development is happening in the Caribbean Basin as well, we've seen things that are taking place. I was with the President of the Dominican Republic earlier. They're dealing with matters relating to shipping and logistics, and other CARICOM countries as well. Those are the types of things of which we are working on together, because we can be self-sufficient. We have the ability to do so, but we have to continue to work together. If we don't work together, then no nation can do it by themselves.
Well, if you can't work together and you don't work together, what is the consequence?
The consequence is dependency, which is what we have in some cases now. And when policy making may change, that poses a challenge.
And that is anticipated it will happen at some point, right? I've heard from so many world leaders that they just have to ride this wave, but the dust still hasn't settled. So there's a long way to go. I wonder what you view in terms of a good partner, and whether you're aligned with the US right now? On
Absolutely.
policy, on ideology,
So here's the way that you approach these situations. And of course, I've been doing this job for quite some time.
Yeah.
And so whenever anyone asks me about a political situation in a particular country, I say I will never comment on the domestic politics of a particular country. If it is a democracy, that country has the right to elect their leaders, and that country has the right to operate the way that it operates. And you just have to respond in kind. I think having a conversation with one of my fellow heads of government, we just have to make sure that we take a pragmatic approach. And you cannot go to this from an ideological perspective and an ideological bent. You can't say, oh, I don't like that person, or I don't like their overall views, or I don't like what they've done here. The reality is that for your citizens and for the persons who you represent and serve, you have to make sure you engage in those relationships. So our relationship with the United States remains strong. It is our largest trading partner, and we continue to make sure that we represent our views and our interests. And the reality is that what we have seen in large measure, whether it's Bermuda or in the Caribbean Basin, they have actually listened, because sometimes, if you go through the policymaking process, if you go and consult, and to make sure you can find out if there are some negative repercussions for what you're thinking and make those adjustments not to harm your closest neighbors.
What would you say the biggest national security threat is right now? And it's so interesting because the conversation has shifted somewhat. I find a lot of countries are talking about securing critical minerals. It shifted away from energy in a sense, but that's still very much part of the conversation. Do you feel that there's been a shift in what is defined as national security?
Well, I think that what we see right now is, now this might be a little bit controversial, I'll go there. What we see right now is a whole lot of persons clamoring over the new thing. Now, the new thing is AI. Now, clearly, AI is going to change, but that's where all that is coming from, because it's like, how do I get the minerals to make the batteries? How do I get the minerals to make the chips? How do I get the minerals to do all the rest? So I think it's from that particular perspective. What I would say more broadly, if I were to look at the greatest, my view, security threat more broadly, I think it is actually the rush into AI without adequate safeguards, without recognizing what problems that can cause. And even now, because, the AI world has been alight over the past, week about what people are doing, installing Claude-bot on their machines and doing all these types of stuff. And then they're just marveling to see agents that are talking to each other and doing financial transactions and everything else. And then the question is, that's today. Remember, the worst AI that you will use is the AI that you're using right now. And it's pretty good in many aspects. So that, I think, is something. And when we're talking about, the World Government Summit, we're talking about how do you make policies for the future, there is clearly not enough discussion on how we make sure that AI is used for good and in a responsible fashion.
I love that. The worst AI you're ever going to use
is the one
that you used today. I'm never going to forget that. That's super, super interesting. I mean, you've done some incredible things in Bermuda. You've introduced Bermuda's first statutory minimum wage. You're very focused on, IT, and I mean, you're an IT entrepreneur. You've done some incredible stuff on financial services and so forth. So tell me a little bit about the dynamics of the economy in Bermuda and what's the driving force, and what do you think the new trend is going to be?
So the driving force of Bermuda's economy is certainly financial services. Bermuda is known as the world's risk capital. We have the most insurance companies without question on a per capita basis, but the total amount of assets underneath our combined insurance sector is just south of $2 trillion. And we're talking about an economy that is only a $10 billion economy. So it is significant. We insure most of the world's risks. The amount of claims of which we've paid out over the past 20 years exceeds $1 trillion in claims. So it is significant. But from that aspect, when you are a small jurisdiction, you have to specialize in something.
But you have to diversify.
Yes, but you cannot diversify with anything. So for instance, I'm in Bermuda. It would be illogical for me to say I'm going to diversify into manufacturing because I don't have enough space to manufacture things, the energy costs are too high, et cetera. So you have to focus on what you can. So our diversification is diversification of the financial services landscape, recognizing that it can't just be insurance and we have to do more things. And so one of the things in which we're doing, recognize the future is digital, is that Bermuda was one of the first countries on the planet to introduce digital regulation for the digital asset sector. We did that 8 years ago in 2018 when persons were looking at us and saying, you're crazy, you don't know what you're doing. Now, 8 years later, they're looking back at us and saying, most of the legislation that has happened, whether it's the legislation of the European Union, whether it's legislation in Asia, whether it's legislation in the United States, have copied elements from our legislation that we wrote in 2018 because we have expertise in regulation. There's only 2 countries in the world that have regulatory equivalents with both the United States and the European Union, and that's Bermuda and Switzerland. So we know where we play well, and you have to play on those strengths and use that to diversify within the financial services sector.
Okay, so taking a macro approach now, look, the world has been through so many different cycles, whether it's financial crises that we saw in 2008, whether we saw, COVID, there's been a lot of changes. And I think that, and I've spoken to so many people who say the world has been sleeping at the wheel while allowing China to take control of 90% of processing with some critical minerals. And now we're trying to rebalance this. It's going to be very hard to do. So in your mind, who do you think is going to win this competition that we're seeing, and which side does Bermuda want to be on at the end of the day?
So I think the challenge is, I'm not in the business of choosing sides. As you
want to be non-aligned.
Absolutely. Well, as an overseas territory, I'm aligned to the foreign policy of the United Kingdom. And so from that perspective, It is clear. But what I would say on a broad measure, the challenge is we frame it in the aspect of competition. And I think that's really what it is. If you go back to the Cold War, and if you go back to the balance at that point in time, the balance at that point in time was mutually assured destruction. It still, as some way, has a basis in the geopolitical balance of which we have now today. But the same destructive power that nuclear weapons could pose, it could be argued that with the development of artificial intelligence and others, it can be just as destructive in just other ways. And I think that there is the conversation which is necessary, and I think the GCC region does it well, especially the UAE. And I know there are hosts, and I'm not playing to the hosts in any way, shape, or form. They take an approach to say we're not aligned, we are going to try to be friends with everyone. And I think that is the approach, because if we look at this from a competition perspective and continue to compete, it can only end badly.
No, I'm glad you said that, because during the Cold War it was actually total imbalance, and I feel like we're heading there again. But it was different because it was almost like you had to pick. They didn't like non-aligned, the non-aligned movement. And I think my worry is that, are we going to get to a point where countries are going to have to pick sides? Do you think we're heading towards there?
I would hope not. I would hope not, because when we talk about a multipolar world, there's so many different things. And the way that communication and the way that interactions were back then is completely different now. The world moves much faster, communication moves much faster, things are moving much faster, technology is moving much faster. Things can change in an instant. And so from that aspect, I would sincerely hope not. And I think it is up to, the leaders that exist, but also the as you had asked in the last question, is multilateralism dead? No, it is not. It may be feeling challenged right now, but it is not dead, because it cannot die, because it's necessary for the world to survive. A world without multilateralism is a world that does not survive into the next century.
I think you need to WhatsApp the leaders of certain countries to tell them that, to be honest. Okay, super interesting. I want to, end with this, and I think it's important. We're here in the GCC. You're seeing so much excitement, so much investment, big conversations happening. We have the Nobel laureates here. They're focusing on science and all these things. And I keep wondering, with all these distractions, these global distractions, whether it's wars, whether it's territorial interests, whatever it may be, that it's taking away from important issues like investing in what the future is going to look like for our kids, investing in sustainability and the environment, do you feel like the world is too distracted and we're investing in the wrong things?
So I could not agree with that statement anymore. And I think that is the reality. There is a significant amount of distractions. It is like they say, there's noise, and then there's the actual signals, and you have to separate from the two. I think if you look at the UAE and the thing of what you said, the GCC, they do not allow themselves to be distracted.
They're long-term game.
Yes,
you've got to have a long-term game.
They have laid out their long-term strategy, but let's be clear. That is the exact same thing that China did in the 1980s. They had a long-term strategy as well. It is not as though China just started, becoming the world's factory. It has been going on for quite some time. And so from that aspect, I do believe that some are distracted. But I think that if you have a long-term strategy, whether you're a small country like ours, we had a long-term strategy. We said we're going to focus on diversifying our financial services sector and grow. And in the 9 years under my leadership, we've gone from a deficit position to a surplus position. We've gone to record low unemployment. We've gone to record jobs in international business, all those types of things. It is able, if you understand your strategy, stick to it and remain focused and not to be distracted, because the noise will always come. You just have to make sure you navigate understanding where you want to take your country and or your jurisdiction.
And I think you're right. We're stuck in this bout of short-termism, and the countries that are doing really well are the ones that had long-term approaches. So very interesting, and thank you so much. I also have to say I accidentally invoked Bermuda a few times today because I referred to my handbag as the Bermuda Triangle.
Well, it's nice.
Ladies, is your handbag the Bermuda Triangle? Because mine certainly is. A few of you are laughing. Well, thank you so very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's so great to have you all with us, and thank you for joining us for this great session.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you so much, Premier. Thank you.